Hi, my name is Billy, and I got stuck inside the girls' locker room at school. I saw everything. This crazy situation also got me a date with the cutest girl in my class. Let me tell you all about what happened. I was always naturally curious, and that curiosity often got me in trouble. Lately, I had been hearing all sorts of crazy stories about what went on in the girls' locker room. Could any of it be true? At first, I tried asking my female friends if there was any truth to the rumors. They just laughed and told me that was a secret. They were being silly, I knew, but the curiosity only grew bigger and bigger. More than ever after being teased by them, I needed to know. Of course, a guy can't simply stroll into the girls' changing room without getting into a whole lot of problems. I knew I had to be sneaky about it, and so I began doing some thinking. Soon, a brilliant idea came to me. There were always more lockers in our locker room than students actually using them. So maybe, just maybe, this also happened to them? I casually asked, and they said that yes. I tried to pretend I was only asking because I found the waste of money silly, and they believed me. I knew I couldn't go ahead with my plan right away since I had been asking all sorts of questions about the subject. It would be too suspicious and they would keep check on what I did and didn't do. So I waited. It was hell. My curiosity was spiking and I wanted to get answers at once. Still, I managed to wait a few weeks, and by then my questions were completely forgotten. It was then that I decided it was time to sneak into the locker room. When gym class began, I sneaked away. Everyone was busy, so they didn't notice I was missing. I wanted so badly to see if it looked like the room I knew so well. Much to my disappointment, there was nothing at all surprising about it. It was just a regular old locker room. Nothing I had heard about it was true. I looked around for a while and determined that it was completely normal. So dull. The problem was, PE finished early, and I had heard the girls chatting as they came closer and closer to the door. I freaked out and hid in one of the empty lockers as I had planned before. I didn't expect anyone to come in so soon. I was totally not prepared for the girls bursting into the room. I stood there silently, trying to breathe as little as possible so that no one would notice me there. I was just behind a thin metal door, and there were thin openings through which I could see, well, everything. I hoped that no one decided to open that locker for some reason. If they did, I would be expelled and my parents would ground me for life. The girls were chatting and chatting about just about anything. They talked about clothes, sports, what plans they had for the weekend. And then they began to talk about guys. I blushed when I heard my name mentioned a few times. It was hard focusing though, because I also got to catch glimpses of them disrobing and getting dressed in their regular uniforms. They were all so pretty. It was hard keeping my eyes off them. When I heard Emily's voice, I was stunned. She was the prettiest and most popular girl at school, and she was talking about me. She told her friends that she had a massive crush on me and that she hoped I'd ask her out soon. She wondered if I'd like to go to the prom with her. I was stunned. I couldn't help but smile to myself. I was worried I'd chuckle with happiness and they'd all catch me hiding right there, staring at them from inside the locker. I couldn't believe that Emily wanted to go out with me. She had been my crush for years, and I always figured I didn't have a chance with such a pretty girl. Now, thanks to my curiosity, I knew that she actually wanted me to ask her out. It didn't take long for the girls to get ready and leave the room just as quickly as they arrived. They kept on chatting and gossiping, but as the bell rang, they all stepped outside. I was so relieved that no one had noticed me in there. Now, all I had to do was wait a few more minutes just in case someone came back to retrieve something they forgot in the locker room. When I was certain the coast was clear, I tried to sneak out, but much to my horror, I realized the door was locked. I tried to get out for a while, but soon realized there was no way I would be able to. So instead, I decided I'd sleep there and escape right after first period, when everyone was already in class. I barely rested at all that night and was constantly jumping at every tiny sound. I was terrified someone would catch me in there. Thank heavens no one came around, and come morning, I hid back inside the empty locker room. When the bell rang again, I waited for a few more minutes and then rushed outside, relieved the door was open that time. I walked into class and was so happy to finally be on the clear. I was exhausted, but it was all over. I told my best friend all about what had happened, and he was completely shocked. He didn't know if he should believe me or not, but I swore it was true. That day, I walked up to Emily and asked her out. She smiled at me and said yes immediately. So sometimes being curious can really work for the best. Thank you for watching. What's the craziest thing you ever did out of curiosity? Let us know in the comments. Please don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.
Hi, my name is Andrew, and I'd like to tell you the story of how I got stuck in the elevator with the girl I liked. Her name is Allison, and I never imagined that I'd get to spend so much time with her with no one else around. It was both a blessing and a curse, I can tell you as much. Allison was an incredibly beautiful girl. She had the prettiest blue eyes and dark short hair. She was also the smartest girl in my class. I was in awe of Allison, but was too shy to speak to her, so she didn't even know I existed. The perfect chance to finally change this fact came right after class had ended on a boring Friday afternoon. Most of the students had already left for the weekend, and I saw Allison getting on the elevator. She was probably going up to the library to return her books. I rushed forward, not even thinking twice about it. If I got in the elevator with her, maybe I'd finally get a chance to speak to her. I wanted to find out so much about Allison. What she liked, what she hated, what her favorite book was. I'd admired her from afar for so long, but didn't know almost anything about her personal life. I wanted to change this fact, and I wanted her to know more about me as well. I wished that maybe she might find me interesting, and perhaps, just perhaps, get the courage to actually ask her out on a date. I had daydreamed so often about this moment. There were so many jokes and cute remarks I'd pictured myself saying in every imaginary conversation. She laughed and smiled constantly. She was interested in me, at least in my head. But in the real world, Allison didn't even know my name. Perhaps this was my chance to finally change this fact. The problem was, I had rushed to get to the elevator before the door closed. I wished that she hadn't seen me running, because that would have been so lame. I actually placed my foot in between the doors to keep them from closing, and managed to get inside just in time. When I stepped inside, she gave me a sweet little smile, and then looked up ahead again. As I had imagined, the floor she had selected was the one leading up to the library. She was so responsible and well-read. I know that might not sound like an amazing trait to some people, but to me, it only made me fancy her more. Anyways, I kept trying to talk to her, and knew that the elevator trip would be super short, but every time I tried to open my mouth, I felt sick to my stomach. When I thought all hope was lost, something strange happened. The elevator suddenly rocked from side to side and then came to a sudden halt. We almost fell to the ground, but I managed to hold her just before she tripped over. I ended up with my arms wrapped around her, leaning back against the lift's wall to regain my balance. She blushed and thanked me, standing back up. I felt awful about not having her in my arms any longer, but I couldn't let her know that, so I just smiled timidly and shrugged. We both tried to see what was wrong with the elevator, but it seemed just to be stuck. So we pressed the emergency button and decided it was best to wait for help to arrive. She gave me a few awkward looks, but we just stood there in perfect silence for the first few minutes or two. Finally, she introduced herself, and I pretended I didn't already know her name. I did tell her I thought I had seen her in a few of my classes, and she seemed surprised. Apparently, she had never even noticed me before. That kind of stung, but I shrugged it off. The past didn't matter any longer, only the future. And if I played my cards right, there might be a future for both of us after all. The conversation was admittedly a bit awkward at first. We talked about our classes and the weather, and we kept getting stuck in these uncomfortable silences before one of us dared to speak again. After a while, we tried pressing the button again and heard it ring. Surely someone would be there to help us out shortly, we figured out. After all, the bell was really loud. So we began talking more openly, and that made me feel better. She was really funny, just like I had imagined. But the problem was, minutes kept going by and no one came to help us. That was when we began to get really nervous. Allison and I decided to begin screaming for help and banging on the walls of the elevator. No one answered. I checked the time and realized that by that hour, every single student had left already, and probably most of the teachers. We were stuck in there, and might have to stay locked in an elevator all through the weekend. We immediately began freaking out for real. It took us some time to calm down. She was in tears, but I reminded her that our parents would get worried soon, so we might have to wait a few hours, but someone would eventually come to help us. Or so I hoped. She seemed to believe me and wiped off her tears. I mean, I know we both understood that even if our parents realized we were missing, they might not think to look for us at school. But it was a reassuring thought, and we both clung to it. Panicking would only make a bad situation worse. I suggested we play a game to relax, and she agreed. We both sat down on the floor and began asking questions to each other. The more we played, the bolder and sillier the questions got. I really learned a lot from Allison, and I told her a lot about myself. I'd never felt closer to anyone in my life. It seemed like the right time to admit my feelings for her had finally arrived. I was going to do it, at long last. I was going to tell Allison that I was in love with her, and I wanted to take her out on a real date. But before I managed to speak up, she suddenly blurted out that she was pregnant. I was in absolute shock. I asked her what she was talking about. Apparently, she'd been keeping that secret bottled up for 2 weeks, and she couldn't deal with it any longer. She needed to tell someone, and I seemed like such a sweet and trustworthy guy. Allison explained that she was dating this guy from another school, and she didn't even realize that she'd gotten pregnant until the morning sickness began. She tried telling him about it, but the guy was apparently not very nice. He once began joking about how he'd run away in a second if a chick ever tried to tie him down with a pregnancy trick. Yes, he used the word chick. What a girl like Allison was doing with a guy like that, I couldn't understand. She was sure that he'd think that she'd gotten pregnant to force him to marry her. She didn't dare tell him, and her parents would be super mad and disappointed with her. Allison told me she felt stuck, and she didn't know where to go for help. I told her that she didn't have to feel that way. It was a bump on the road, but she was smart and strong enough to pull through any adversity. She was so thankful and called me sweet, giving me a peck on the cheek. It was the best and worst moment of my life. I enjoyed the kiss, but I also knew that she was going out with another guy now. So yeah, you can say it was a bittersweet moment. The problem was, it was already really dark outside, and no one had come looking for us. We were both really hungry and didn't know how long we'd be stuck in there. We were getting really worried again that no one would rescue us until Monday. I had a few crackers and a bit of leftovers from my lunch that I shared with Allison, and that ended up being our dinner. Teasingly, I told her that this was sort of a date, and she chuckled at my joke. I wasn't really joking, though, or at least I hoped I wasn't. We barely slept at all that night, too worried and scared to rest. She did place her head on my shoulder and took a short nap, though. Allison was so warm and smelled so good. It was so much temptation to have her there, so close to me. Morning arrived, and still there wasn't any sign that anyone was coming to rescue us. We were getting thirsty, and we shared the last drops of juice that she had in her bag. That was it. From then on, we didn't have anything else to drink or eat, and it was only Saturday. We were really starting to freak out, but I didn't want to let her know that I was scared. After all, she was pregnant, and stress wasn't good for the baby. I tried to distract her by telling her silly stories and talking about my life. I also asked her a lot of questions about her personal life, and little by little, I got her to calm down. It was such a relief. Seeing her doing better made me relax as well. We talked for hours and hours, and really enjoyed each other's company. Sure, the situation was horrible, but at least we had each other. By midday, I finally decided I had nothing to lose. I admitted my feelings for her and told Allison that a guy like her boyfriend didn't deserve her. If she was with me, I'd help her take care of her baby. She was so surprised at first, but a moment later she smiled. Allison told me that was the sweetest thing that anyone had ever said to her. And then she kissed me. I couldn't believe what was happening. The kiss was everything I had imagined and more. It was truly a magical moment, and I forgot all about being trapped in that elevator. Suddenly, we heard noises coming from a floor down. Someone was screaming her name. We called back, relieved and surprised. It was the school's janitor, accompanied by the principal and Allison's parents. They knew their daughter would never disappear like that, and that she had been heading toward the library, so they contacted the school's headmaster. No one knew I was there, but I, later on, found out that my parents had gone to the police. The problem was they had no idea where to begin searching for me. We were freed half an hour later, and I had never felt more relieved. Allison hugged her parents, and then she blurted out that she was pregnant. They were so relieved that she was okay that they didn't really get mad at her, so getting stuck in an elevator might have been a blessing after all. The very next day, I got a text from Allison asking me to hang out. She had dumped her good-for-nothing boyfriend and wanted to know if I really meant what I said in the lift. I told her I did and officially asked her out on a date. That was 5 years ago. Now we're married, and I adopted Allison's daughter. She is the most amazing little girl in the world. Thank you for watching. Have you ever had a crush on someone who doesn't even know your name? Tell us about it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other videos on the channel.
Hi, I'd love to tell you how I finally managed to begin dating my long-term crush, Britta. You see, I'm not particularly shy, but when it came to Britta, I just lost my nerve. I don't know what it was about her that made me a mumbling fool. I mean, damned. I could be talking with any other girl or boy like it was no big deal. Then, Britta would walk down the hall and I'd blush and go quiet. It was uncanny. I simply couldn't get over it. But before we move on, like this video, hit that subscribe button, and activate the notification bell. This will let you live 20 amazing years longer. Trust me, it works. Actually, it all started back in elementary school. We shared our classes together, and from the first time I saw her, I fumbled. She was the prettiest girl in school to me, even if we were really, really young. She had long brown hair, always combed back in 2 ponytails. I thought those were the cutest ponytails in the world. Yeah, I had a big puppy love on her, and I was like, 7 or something? It's kind of lame that it took me so long to actually ask her out. It all happened because both our friends got super tired of seeing us go through this endless will they, won't they scene over and over again. Let me tell you how I ended up locked up in a closet with Britta, my childhood crush. Britta wasn't just pretty. Oh no, she was also super smart and the president of our student council. I loved to see her campaigning for her position every year, smiling at everyone with that big grin on her face. I listened to her proposals to improve the school programs like a million times. Well, I never actually heard any of it. I just used it as an excuse to stare at her without her realizing what I was doing. I'd get lost in those beautiful eyes of hers. She dressed all prim and proper everywhere she went, too, like cute pleated skirts and nice blouses. I don't know what it was about her, or if it was everything she did, really, but I couldn't stop thinking about Britta. My mom used to laugh when I spoke about her and thought it was so sweet the way I always had nice things to say about this girl. You know, Mike, you speak about Britta as most boys speak about Candy, with that dreamy look in their eyes, she once said. I must have been 8 back then, but this never changed. Mom said I always got the same look whenever someone mentioned it. I'm not sure if it's sweet or creepy, but I couldn't help myself. As long as I had memory, I had always been in love with Britta. We were good friends, too. It was just that I was so awkward around her. Whenever I tried to act cool, I ended up making a fool of myself. My friends made fun of me all the time because of it. Britta lived a block and a half away from me, so I'd walk her home often. We'd talk about anything and everything, but I never, ever dared ask her out. It was as if when it came to admitting my feelings, I just froze around her. I couldn't get past this problem. It was so annoying. I mean, if I had been shy around everyone, well, maybe I would have understood it. But it was just when it came to my feelings for this pretty brown-haired girl that I couldn't get over my feelings of self-doubt. I guess I thought she was so perfect that there was no way in hell she'd ever date a guy like me, you know? I mean, I'm not ugly or anything of the sort, and girls flirt with me all the time, but she was just too beautiful, too smart, too everything. And the worst part was, all our mutual friends knew about my crush. And I do mean everyone. It was one of those secrets that all around you are aware of, but everyone pretends not to know about it. Come on, man, ask her out already. What's the worst that could happen? My friends would ask me, super annoyed with me always sighing about Britta. She could say no, I'd always reply. To me, that was the worst possible outcome. If I didn't ask her out, then I didn't know if it was possible or not. I could imagine one day we'd begin dating and then get married. But if she finally found out my feelings for her and rejected me, it was all over. Years and years of being in love with someone who'd never love me back, thrown away for nothing. I couldn't face that possibility. I know it sounds super lame, but that's how much I really liked Britta. Every single time I promised my friends I'd ask her out the very next day, I'd find an excuse to avoid it. Oh, I'm feeling super sick today, I would say. Or maybe, I have this big pimple today. I don't want her to see me like this. So days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The right time to ask her out never seemed to arrive, and my friends were growing super impatient. Apparently, they talked to her friends all the time, and she felt the same way about me. But that's something neither Britta or I knew. It was like this gossip everyone was involved in except for the both of us. I have the whole situation under control. I promise, I said over and over again. Finally, our friends got tired of waiting for us to make the first move and made a plan. They were going to force us to be in the same place for a long while. And if we didn't finally ask each other out, then they were going to give up. It was then or never. So one day, my friends grabbed me and began forcing me into the janitor's closet. I tried to fight them, playfully of course, thinking it was just a silly prank. "Hey guys, quit it. I have to get to class," I yelled, laughing. But I couldn't win against 5 guys pushing me into a little room. They closed the door and locked it behind them. I sighed and rolled my eyes, wondering what they had in store for me. "Don't worry about it. We'll be back soon," they yelled through the door, and I rolled my eyes. You see, my friends were really big pranksters, so this didn't seem too odd to me. It was annoying, yes, especially since I didn't want to be tardy or get in trouble. However, it seemed I had nothing to do but wait. A few minutes later, the door opened, and I was shocked to see Britta being dragged by her friends inside the closet as well. She looked just as surprised as I had been a while ago. They threw her in there as well and locked the door behind them. We were both like, WTF is going on? My heart dropped. I felt so anxious, and I'm sure I blushed so hard. I was locked up with Britta, and it made me feel so excited and worried at the same time. We heard giggling from the other side of the room, and I knew our friends had planned all of this for some odd reason. We kind of awkwardly stood there for a minute in silence, then tried knocking on the door, but no one answered. "I guess we are really stuck in here, huh?" Britta asked, her brown hair hanging prettily over her shoulders. "I guess so," I mumbled, shrugging quietly. So bit by bit, we began talking, asking ourselves why we were locked up in that closet. We began throwing silly theories around, making each other laugh. I couldn't get over how beautiful her giggles were, and how badly I wanted her to be my girlfriend. We knew there was no point in trying to make an escape, and so we just sat down and continued to chat. I mumbled most of what I said, as I always did when she was around. My heart was pounding in my ears, and I kept telling myself this was my chance, that I had to ask her out. Finally, she looked at me and asked, "Why are you always so nervous around me, Mike?" I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to let her know how I felt about her, but all I could do was stare at the floor quietly. "Hey, Mike, will you close your eyes, please?" she asked me. I looked up at her puzzled, but nodded. The moment I closed my eyes, Britta kissed me. I couldn't believe what was going on. I opened my eyes and smiled. That kiss, sweet and small, sure helped ease my nervousness. It was the confirmation that she did like me, that I had a chance with her. Holding my breath, I kissed her back, and this time she closed her eyes. Her lips were so soft and perfect. It was everything I had hoped it would be. So we started really talking, and for the first time since we met, I could speak to her without feeling incredibly insecure. I even held her hand and pulled her a bit closer to me. Finally, about an hour after being locked in there with her, I dared ask the question I had been holding in for so many years. "Britta, would you go on a date with me?" I asked. And do you know what she said? "Yes, I'd love to." We spent the rest of our time there planning out our date. It seemed like a dream come true. When our friends finally unlocked the door, we kissed goodbye and walked away. My friends followed behind me, and her friends did the same with her. "So how did it go?" they asked me. They all looked so excited, especially after seeing us kiss. I told them everything that happened, and we high-fived like crazy. "You finally did it, man. It took you 9 years, but you finally did it." My best friend patted my back, and I can't explain how happy I was right then. "Thank you, guys. I can't believe your crazy plan worked," I said, really grateful for all the trouble they had gone through. Britta and I went on our first date, and then our second and third and fourth. We've made it official, and I've already asked her to go with me to prom. I can't believe my girlfriend is really the most gorgeous girl in school. I used up all my savings to rent a limo and a suit. I want this to be the most special night of her entire life. Britta's been my secret crush ever since I was a kid, and now we are a real, official couple. We go out on dates twice a week, and I buy her flowers whenever I can. She loves lilies and white roses, and her birthday's coming up soon. I want to give her a ring. Sort of a pre-engagement thing, you know? I understand we are super young to be talking about marriage yet, but I want to let her know that I'm really committed to her. After all, I do believe Britta is the love of my life. Thank you for watching. Have you ever struggled to ask a guy or a girl out on a date? And did you dare do it in the end? Did they say yes or rejected you? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.
Colin, something came in the mail for you, my mom shouted. Coming, Mom, I said as I rushed downstairs. When I reached the dining room, she handed me an envelope addressed from my dream college. This was the letter I had been waiting for. I grabbed it nervously and opened it as quickly as I could. I got in! I got in! I screamed. I was so excited. I would finally be moving out of this small town and going to college to study computer science. I'd be traveling over 2,000 miles away to start a life of my own. I felt so relieved. I'd finally be free. A few weeks later, I was all packed and ready to leave. My family came to see me off at the airport. As the plane took off, I imagined my new independence as a college student. When I arrived on campus, I realized that I forgot the most important task on my to-do list. I hadn't registered for a dorm room. I found my way to the student center and asked if they could help. Well, all of the rooms are fully booked, honey, said an old lady who was sitting at a desk. What am I supposed to do now? I have nowhere to stay, I replied. At that moment, a girl walked in and said, Hi, I'm Megan. I'm renting off campus and there's an extra room, she smiled. Well, that's if you don't mind living with a girl and a complete stranger, she laughed. At that point, I felt like I had no choice, so I followed her. I'd never even had a girlfriend, so it'd be really weird living with someone who wasn't a guy. So what do you study here? I asked. Medicine, she replied. We arrived at the apartment, which was on the 9th floor of a breathtaking complex. It was pretty luxurious for the average college student. I was so impressed, but how would I afford it? She showed me around and we discussed the rent details. It turned out to be pretty affordable. What luck! I went to my huge room with an ensuite bathroom to get unpacked. I was almost on the streets, but instead, I was in a room that was better than my own at home. When I woke up the next day, the apartment was empty, and this is pretty much how it was almost every day. When Megan was around, she only said a few words, then went to her room or disappeared to God knows where. As for me, I was enjoying the heck out of college life. I went to parties, stayed up late, drank, but not too much, and really lived. My classes were awesome because I was finally doing what I loved. To make it even better, I met Sandra, the smartest person in our class. There was a lot of chemistry between us. We started off studying at the library together, and eventually we went out on dates. I could tell she really liked me, and I was beginning to fall head over heels in love with her. I think that all the trouble started when I brought her back to the apartment one evening. She lost the key for her room, and it was too late to call anyone about it, so I told her she could stay there. We sat in the living room watching TV when Megan walked in. Hey, Megan, I said. Hi, she replied with a confused expression on her face. Who is that? She asked angrily. This is Sandra, my really good friend. She lost the key to her room, so I told her she could stay here tonight, I replied, curious as to why Megan seemed so upset. Why'd you have to bring her here? Doesn't she have other friends? Megan asked without even looking at Sandra. I think I should leave, Sandra said. No, don't. Let's just go to my room. Maybe Megan wants to watch TV, I said. I got up, scowled at Megan, and escorted Sandra to my room, ensuring to slam the door so she'd get the point. What had gotten into her? The next day, Megan was gone before we woke up. Sandra left and got her room sorted out, and I tried not to think too much about last night's confusing experience. When I got back to the apartment later, Megan greeted me at the door with a smile. Hi, Colin. I'm sorry about what happened last night. Here, I've done something to make it up to you. Are you hungry? She said. She took me to the dining table where a beautiful candlelit dinner was set up. Wow, it was okay though. I figured you were probably in one of your moods. You didn't have to do all of this, I replied while stuttering because I felt extremely uncomfortable. Yes, I did. Please sit, she said. I sat down and began to eat. I could never turn down food. Midway into the meal, Megan said, Colin, there's something I need to tell you. Huh? What is it? I managed to say through a mouthful of food. I have feelings for you. Romantic ones. Like, Ever since I met you at the Student Services Center, I felt that we had a special connection. When you agreed to live with me, I was so happy. I wanted you to stay so badly that I'm actually covering 3/4 of your rent. I know I didn't always show that I had feelings for you, but that's about to change today. I reacted that way last night because you brought someone else here, and I thought that maybe you had feelings for her instead of me, she said. I dropped my fork and stared blankly. Megan, you're a nice person and all, don't get me wrong, but Sandra and I are sort of dating. I was actually thinking of asking her to be my girlfriend pretty soon. And I don't really think you're my type anyway. I'm sorry, Megan, I said. She instantly burst into tears. I went over to her side of the table and patted her on her shoulder. I cleared up the dinner because it was the least that I could do after breaking her heart. Then I went to my room. The next morning, Megan hadn't left yet, which was odd. I was used to waking up to an empty apartment. Good morning, Colin, she said. Good morning, I replied. I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable last night. I was just tired of hiding my feelings. Here, I packed you a breakfast because I know you've got an early class today, she said. Gee, thanks, Megan. I'm actually running late. See you later, I said while rushing out of the door. While walking to my class, I actually considered finding a new place to live. How was I going to live with a person who was obsessed with me? One that I had no interest in. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was Sandra. Hey, can you meet me near the library before class? There's something I want to talk to you about, she said. Sure, I'm on my way, I replied. When I got there, she was already waiting. She smiled and we walked to a nearby bench. Well, what is it? I asked. We've been going out for a while and, well, I was wondering when you'd ask me to be your girlfriend. Do you really care about me? She said sadly. Wow, of course I care about you. I'm in love with you and I was afraid to ask you to be my girlfriend because I wasn't sure if it was the right time, I replied. I held her hands and looked into her eyes. Sandra, I'd really like for us to become more than friends. Will you be my girlfriend? I asked. Yes, she smiled. Instead of going to class, we spent the day together. We had a wonderful, romantic time. Later, I went back to the apartment. When I got there, Megan was sitting in the living room. Hey, Colin, how was your day? She asked. Hi, it was okay, thanks, I said uncomfortably as I fled to my room. A few minutes later, I heard a knock on my door. Yes, I asked. Can you help me with something? I think the light in my room is broken and I don't know how to fix it, Megan said. Sure, I'll be right there, I replied. I left my room and walked over to hers. She opened the door and I noticed that the light was on. There's nothing wrong with this, I said. She reached behind me and I heard a click. What are you doing? I asked. Colin, I explained to you that I had feelings for you and you didn't care. You didn't even care that you hurt my feelings. I'm locking you here in my room until you fall in love with me. You're the only one I want, so you have to feel the same way too, eventually, she said. What? I screamed. You can't do that. That's a crime. I'll have you arrested. You're psychotic and you need help right now. I was so angry. I reached for the door and tried to unlock it. It can only be activated by my fingerprint. You won't be able to get out, she smirked. I ran to the window and tried to open it. That's also pointless, she laughed. The window's locked. Even if I did get out, we were on the 9th floor. I'd seriously hurt myself if I tried to escape through there. I decided to try a different approach. Please let me out, I said calmly. I can't stay in here. I have to go to my classes. What will my parents think if they don't hear from me? Please don't do this, I pleaded. Food, clothing, and shelter are the basic necessities, and you'll have them all. Anything else is a luxury. I will send a message to your parents once a week from your phone so they'd know you're okay, she replied coldly. Oh crap, I left my phone in my room, I thought. You're insane. Let me out, I said. You're not going anywhere until I'm sure you love me back. Anyway, you might as well sit down and make yourself comfortable, she said. Her room was pretty huge, much bigger than mine. There was a king-size bed, a couch, television, desktop computer, and like my room, she also had an ensuite bathroom, so there was no way I could use that as a way out. I sat on the couch and stared into space. I didn't know what to do next. A whole 2 weeks passed. Megan tried to be nice to me, but I refused to talk to her. Every day, she brought me my favorite foods and other things she thought I would like. She told me that my parents weren't worried about me because she'd been sending them messages while pretending to be me. The days and nights were very long, and every attempt I made to escape was prevented. I missed Sandra. I wondered what she thought of me and why I hadn't been in touch. After about a month, I started speaking a bit. I'd give her one-word answers when she asked about my day. 6 months later, I began to notice the little things about her. the way she combed her hair and laughed when she watched stupid sitcoms. I began to notice the sparkle in her eyes whenever she did something nice for me. But I quickly shut down those feelings because after all, she was my kidnapper. The days and nights got shorter and less painful. I didn't really miss the outdoors that much because Megan did everything she could to make my life interesting. Eventually, we started having fun. And to be honest, I'm not even sure how that happened, but I began to hate her less. A lot less. I began to lose track of time, and I'm not sure how much had passed when one night she sat next to me and said, "Do you love me, Colin?" I looked at her and saw that sparkle in her eye again. I looked down and thought for a while that she had been so loving towards me even though I continuously pushed her away. She fed me and tried to make me happy, and that was more than anyone had ever done for me. I looked at her and said, yes. And maybe I did, or maybe it was Stockholm Syndrome, but 5 years later, and we are still together. I had to drop out of college because I had missed a whole year. Sandra thought that I had ghosted her and she moved on. Am I happy? I think so. Do I need a therapist? Probably.